My name is Nova Hale, and I'm 28 years old. That night, the roast chicken on my mother's dining table looked perfect. Glazed, golden, crisp enough to shatter under a fork. Everything else about that dinner was the same as every family dinner before it. The comparison, the quiet ridicule, the feeling of sitting at a table where love had a pecking order. Sorry, Nova, my mother corrected herself with a smile that wasn't one. Are you still doing that computer thing? That computer thing was my full-time freelance coding business, but to Lorna Hale, it would never be a real job. Across the table, my brother Bryce leaned back, his cufflinks flashing under the light. You mean the hobby that barely pays rent? He said. Come on, Mom, be nice. His grin was easy, practiced. The grin of someone who knew he could wound without consequence. Dad, Dennis Hale, didn't even look up from his phone. He just muttered, Freelancing's unstable, Nova. You should think long term. The words weren't new, but they hit the same spot they always had. I chewed, swallowed, and forced a polite smile. I am thinking long term, I said. I'm building something. Bryce laughed. Sure. So, when do we see this empire? Before or after your next client ghosts you? Mom's eyes sparkled. Now, Bryce, she said, but there was no real reprimand in it. She's just finding her footing. Then, turning back to me, she added, Still, maybe he's right. You could learn a lot from your brother. That line, the same one I'd heard since high school, landed sharper than it should have. I looked around the table. Crystal glasses, a postcard from a local realtor tucked into the fridge behind Mom, advertising homes in Maple Grove. Bryce's new watch glinted under the chandelier. Dad's silence hummed like white noise. And suddenly, I was 12 again, holding up a trophy from the regional coding fair while Mom beamed over Bryce's debate medal instead. I was 16, listening to Dad say, Be practical, Nova, when I wanted to buy my first laptop. I was 21, showing them my first app, only to hear, Bryce just bought his first condo. Bryce slid his phone across the table. Check this out. A photo of a sleek glass-walled mansion filled the screen. Closed last week. 4 bedrooms. Lake view. Mom gasped. Bryce, that's incredible. Dad actually smiled. You've outdone yourself, son. I set down my fork. Congratulations, I said softly. Bryce leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes fixed on me. What about you, Nova? Still renting that shoebox downtown? Mom sighed as if she pitied me. You could be where Bryce is if you'd chosen a stable career, something with benefits. The silence stretched, thick as syrup. My pulse pounded in my throat. I like what I do, I said, steady but quiet. Bryce's grin widened. You'll be broke forever if you keep that up. Their laughter came all at once, Mom's sharp, Dad's low chuckle, Bryce's careless cackle. It wasn't the first time they'd laughed at me, but that night, something in me cracked and didn't close again. I stared at the polished fork in my hand, catching the distorted reflection of my own face. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just let the noise blur like static in my head, because in that blur a thought surfaced, small, sharp, and certain. One day they'll knock on my door, and I'll be the one deciding who enters. When dinner ended, Mom pressed leftovers into my hands like an apology she'd never say aloud. I mumbled thanks, knowing I'd throw it out before morning. Bryce kissed her cheek, winked at me, and said, Don't work too hard on your little projects, okay? Outside, the air smelled like cut grass and gasoline. I stood by my old sedan for a long moment, staring at the windows of the house where every compliment had always belonged to someone else. Inside, laughter still floated through the curtains. Bryce's voice, confident, untouchable. I started the engine, rolled down the window, and whispered to no one, We'll see. The drive back to my apartment was quiet. Downtown lights flickered against the windshield as if the city itself was reminding me that I didn't need their approval. My approval was overdue. When I got home, I kicked off my shoes, sat cross-legged on the floor, and opened my laptop. The blue light hit my face like sunrise. That's when I created a new folder, Code Path Solutions. The name looked small in the corner of my screen, but it felt like ownership. I set up a website that night, bare bones, half-coded, but mine. No applause, no validation, just the soft hum of my old laptop and the quiet promise of what I'd build. Outside, sirens wailed, cars passed, life went on. But in my tiny apartment, a new one had just started. One day I thought, they'll wish they'd believed me. And when they finally come to see, I'll decide whether the door opens at all. The next few weeks blurred into long nights of code and caffeine. My apartment's walls were thin enough to hear my neighbor's TV through them, but it didn't matter. The sound kept me awake, alert, driven. Every rejected pitch became a spark. Every "we've decided to go with someone else" made my fingers fly faster across the keyboard. I redesigned my portfolio 3 times, rewrote every line of my pitch emails, stopped waiting for validation. By the end of the first month, I'd landed a contract, a startup fitness app that needed a back-end overhaul. 6 months of work, double what I used to make in a year. I stared at the signed PDF, blinking, half afraid it would vanish. When I called my friend Irene Shaw, she screamed through the phone, "Nova, that's huge! You're actually doing it!" "I think I'm scared," I admitted. "If this fails—" "It won't," she cut in. "You just need people to see what you've been building all along." That was the first of many late nights spent screen sharing over video calls, Irene sketching UI designs while I wrote code. Her creativity was chaos. Mine was precision. Together, we made something that worked. I registered my business officially, CodePath Solutions, got a tax ID, built contracts, even learned to say, "That'll cost extra." For the first time, I wasn't just freelancing. I was running something. A few months later, the fitness app went live. Then came the food delivery platform. Then a travel booking site. Referrals piled up faster than I could respond. I hired a part-time virtual assistant to manage emails. When I told Daniel Porter, my financial advisor, about it over coffee, he smiled in that calm, analytical way he had. "You're sitting on momentum, Nova. Keep stacking months like this and you'll be in a position to invest or buy." "Buy what?" I asked, even though the answer glimmered somewhere in my chest already. "A home," he said simply. "Something that builds equity instead of rent receipts." A home. The word felt both heavy and light, like something I'd once wanted but hadn't dared to picture. That night, I opened my browser and typed, "houses for sale near Pittsburgh." Most listings looked like they belonged to someone else's life. Too big, too glossy, too detached from who I was. Then I saw it. A Tudor-style house in Maple Grove. Brick arches, stained glass, ivy curling up the side like handwriting. The caption read, "Historic charm meets modern comfort." It wasn't just a house, it looked like a beginning. The next day, I met the owner, Rose Turner, a sharp-eyed woman in her late 80s who spoke like she'd seen through everyone already. She led me through the rooms with a slow, proud stride. "This house has soul," she said, tracing her fingers along the banister. "I won't sell it to just anyone. Too many people want to gut it and make it something it isn't." "I don't want to change it," I said, "just restore it." Her eyes softened. "Good answer." We walked through the living room, sunlight pouring through a stained glass window, scattering color across the hardwood floors. The study upstairs overlooked a small garden gone slightly wild, but still breathing. I could see it already. My desk there, dual monitors glowing in the dusk, coffee on the sill. "Tell me about your work," Rose said. "I build systems that help other people's ideas function," I told her. "I fix what's broken." Her lips curved. "You'll do just fine here." We ended up sitting in the kitchen for an hour, swapping stories. Her about her late husband who'd built the original fireplace, me about late nights debugging until sunrise. When I left, she squeezed my hand and said, "I think you're the one." By the end of that week, my offer was in. By the next, accepted. Daniel walked me through the down payment numbers, the mortgage options, the insurance clauses. His calm voice anchored me through the dizzying paperwork. "You're not buying a house, Nova," he said. "You're buying proof." The day I signed the final papers, I didn't celebrate. I just drove to Maple Grove alone, parked outside the brick facade, and sat there watching sunlight glint off the stained glass. The key felt heavy in my hand, like a medal I'd forged myself. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar and dust. Empty rooms waited, quiet and patient, like they'd been expecting me. I unrolled a sleeping bag in the living room, opened my laptop on the floor, and watched code run across the screen as the last light of evening filtered through colored glass. For the first time, I wasn't dreaming about someday. I was living the proof of every night I'd stayed up believing I could. Outside, the wind rustled through the ivy. Inside, my house breathed with me. It was mine. Every line of code, every hour, every dismissal I'd swallowed had led me to this key. And I promised myself no one was ever taking it away. The first morning in my new house didn't feel real. I woke up to the kind of quiet I'd never known before. No traffic, no neighbors arguing through thin walls, no drip from the upstairs faucet that my landlord refused to fix. Just sunlight filtering through the stained glass, scattering reds and golds across the floor. I brewed coffee in the corner of the half-finished kitchen, still cluttered with paint swatches and tools. The walls smelled like plaster dust and fresh beginnings. By mid-morning, the renovation crew arrived. 3 men who joked in fast bursts while I explained my vision. Restore, not replace. The oak floors were sanded to a warm amber sheen, the windows polished until the glass glowed again. Every corner of the house seemed to wake up as they worked. I set up my temporary office in the upstairs study, the one with the view of the garden. My dual monitors faced the window, cables snaking across the desk like veins. I coded while the hammering echoed downstairs, my playlists weaving through the rhythm of construction. It was chaos, but it was my chaos. When the contractors left each evening, I'd walk through the rooms barefoot, tracing my fingers along the new trim, whispering small plans to myself. Bookshelves there, desk here, a chair for reading when it rains. There was a peace to the exhaustion. I wasn't just building a workspace, I was rewriting what home meant. Then, on the 3rd week, the first message came. From Mom. Still doing that computer thing? Heard you've been busy. Miss you. 3 sentences, half curiosity, half performance. I stared at it, thumbs hovering over my phone, and then put it down. No reply. The second came 2 days later from Dad. Your mother says you bought a house. That true? I deleted that one without reading it twice. I didn't owe them this version of me, the one who'd learned to build walls that didn't need defending. One evening, I was on a call with Daniel, reviewing my savings after the renovation. You're in good shape, he said, the kind of calm pride that made me pause. Better than good, actually. Most people at your age are still paying off credit cards. I laughed. Guess fear of ending up like your parents' warning works as motivation. Daniel chuckled. You're not running from them anymore, Nova. You're running toward yourself. That line stuck with me. Later that night, I stood in the empty living room, the air thick with the faint hum of fresh paint. I remembered being 16, hiding in my room while Mom lectured Bryce about budgeting, only to end up paying off his overdraft the next week to keep the family peace. I had been the quiet fixer, the one who filled every gap no one else wanted to acknowledge. Standing here now, surrounded by walls I'd chosen, I realized this house was my rebellion. Every inch of it said, I don't owe anyone a bailout anymore. 2 weeks after that, I heard the sound. A car in my driveway. I glanced out through the stained glass, and there they were. Lorna, Dennis, and Bryce. My family in full form. No call, no warning. Just arrival, like they still owned access to my life. Mom's heels clicked against the stone path as she marched up. Dad followed, slow and uncertain. Bryce led the way, sunglasses pushed to his hair, expression smug as ever. The doorbell rang. 3 sharp, deliberate presses. I froze for a second, staring at the door handle. My chest tightened, not from fear, something older, something like muscle memory. Then I opened it. They stared past me, eyes sweeping the archway, the oak, the stained glass. It wasn't pride in their faces. It was disbelief. Mom spoke first, voice high, brittle. People are saying you own this place. Is that true? Dad nodded quickly, trying to soften her tone. We just wanted to see it, honey. It's a big step. We're proud. Bryce crossed his arms, smirking. No way this is yours, Fee. I mean, Nova. Come on. You rent, you don't buy. Something inside me went very still. The smell of their perfume, their presence, it dragged years of conditioning back up like dust in sunlight. But then I looked past them, at the garden blooming behind the glass. The house felt alive around me, protective somehow. I straightened. Yes, it's mine. Mom blinked once. Well, aren't you going to invite us in? No. Her mouth fell open. Excuse me? I met her eyes. You weren't invited, and you don't get to demand entry now. Bryce scoffed, shifting his weight. You're joking. We're family. Exactly, I said. Family's supposed to mean something, but it hasn't, not for a long time. I tightened my grip on the door. Get off my property. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Mom's expression twisted, sharp with disbelief. Nova, don't be ridiculous. I closed the door, firm, final. Their muffled voices spilled through the wood. Bryce's anger, Mom's outrage, Dad's silence trying to contain them. But I didn't open it again. When the sound of their SUV finally faded, I exhaled. My hands trembled, but my heart didn't. I leaned against the door, the cool wood grounding me. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel small for setting a boundary. I felt free. As I looked around my house, the house they said I'd never have, I realized something. Every nail, every line of code, every unpaid compliment I'd swallowed had built this moment. And I wasn't done yet. It started as a rumor, one of those whispered fragments that slips into your inbox from someone you haven't spoken to in years. A college acquaintance messaged me on LinkedIn. Hey, heard about your brother. Rough luck with that investment. Hope your family's holding up. I stared at the screen, pulse steady. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. Because for once, a family disaster didn't have my name attached to it. Over the next few days, the story came together piece by piece. Bryce, the invincible one, the Hale family's golden portfolio, had bet big on a downtown real estate deal. Luxury condos built on borrowed money and overconfidence. The project tanked when the market dipped. The bank called in his loans. His clients pulled out. The beach house he'd once bragged about? Gone. My mother, Lorna, tried to contain it, of course. That was her specialty, hiding the rot behind expensive curtains. She texted me 3 times that week. Nova, could we talk? Family's going through something. Your brother's been under a lot of stress. You'd understand if you just came home. I didn't respond. Silence was my new inheritance. One evening, as the rain traced down my windows, I joined a video call with Irene, who'd just finished uploading her latest designs for our budgeting app project. She grinned through the screen, her hair up in a messy bun, neon post-its crowding the wall behind her. Tell me this isn't poetic, she said. You, the coder who got mocked for being broke, now building the very app that teaches people not to end up like your brother. I laughed, shaking my head. Karma's an efficient algorithm. She snorted. Trademark that. We worked late into the night, tweaking colors and code, the sound of rain blurring into white noise. Outside, lightning flashed. Inside, we built something that worked. For the first time, I realized I didn't just escape my family's dynamic. I'd rewritten the code that powered it. I'd replaced their hierarchy with function, their mockery with output. The next morning, Daniel Porter called. You weren't listed as a co-signer on any of Bryce's accounts, were you? He asked. My heart skipped. No, why? Because one of your old credit addresses popped up in a lender inquiry tied to his name. It's probably a system error, but I'd freeze your reports just in case. I felt the faint prickle of the old anxiety, the one that came from years of being the responsible one, always cleaning up behind him. But this time, I wasn't a bystander waiting for the fallout. Thanks for the heads up, I said. I'll handle it. I hung up, filed the freeze, and kept coding. No drama, no panic, just boundaries, digital and otherwise. 2 nights later, I caught sight of a car idling across the street. Familiar shape, silver SUV. I didn't move closer to the window, but through the stained glass I saw enough. The curve of Mom's hair, the slope of her shoulders. She didn't knock, didn't ring the bell, just sat there for a few minutes, headlights dimmed before driving off. Maybe she wanted to see the house. Maybe she wanted proof that I'd really built something she couldn't take credit for. Either way, I let her go. The next week, the messages changed tone. Nova, we're so proud of you. You've done so well for yourself. Your father says we should all start fresh. Each text read like a press release drafted by guilt. I didn't reply to any of them. Pride meant nothing when it arrived after proof. Instead, I poured my focus into the work. The app launch date neared, and the code stabilized beautifully. Irene came over one Friday, arms full of pizza boxes and design printouts. House still standing? She joked, kicking off her shoes. Better than ever, I said. We worked at the dining table, laughter spilling through the Tudor arches. The place smelled like basil and paint, familiar, alive. Halfway through the evening, Irene looked up from her screen. You ever think they'll really get it? What they did to you? I considered it. The question wasn't bitter. It was curious, tender. No, I said, and I don't need them to. Understanding isn't a prerequisite for closure. She smiled softly. You're getting good at this. At what? Letting go. Later that night, I walked through the house alone, lights dimmed to a warm amber glow. My reflection followed me in the glass panes, steady and sure. The garden outside rustled with early autumn wind. For once, I didn't think about who wasn't texting or calling or asking for help. I thought about how strange it felt to live a life that didn't require permission. Bryce's downfall had been public, but my freedom was quiet. He'd built towers on borrowed money. I'd built peace on boundaries. And when I looked around my house, the house they'd said I'd never have, I realized something. Maybe the truest revenge is stability. It was a Sunday morning, the kind that smelled like rain-soaked leaves and coffee grounds. I was barefoot in the kitchen, debugging a stubborn line of code while Irene hummed from the living room, sketching new design elements for our next client. Then came the knock. 3 slow, deliberate thuds. I froze mid-keystroke. No one ever just showed up at Maple Grove. My few friends always texted first, and delivery guys never bothered knocking twice. I glanced toward the door. The stained glass fractured the gray light into slanted ribbons. A shape moved behind it, tall, hunched, hesitant. "Expecting anyone?" Irene asked, sensing my pause. "No," I said quietly. The knock came again. I crossed the floor and opened the door halfway. Standing there, drenched from the drizzle, was Bryce. He looked nothing like the polished man who once smirked at me over family dinners. The suit was gone, replaced by an ill-fitting jacket. His eyes had the glassy sheen of someone who hadn't slept. His hair, once styled to perfection, now hung in damp disarray. "Hey, Nova," he said, voice small. "Can I come in?" My instinct said no. Every muscle in me tightened, remembering the laughter, the smugness, the words, "You'll be broke forever." But there was something hollow in his tone that caught me off guard. I stepped aside, just a little. He walked in, dripping water onto my newly refinished floor, scanning the living room like he couldn't believe it existed. "So this is it," he murmured. "Your place." I folded my arms. "What do you want, Bryce?" He laughed softly. Not cruel, just broken. I guess, to see how wrong I was. I said nothing. The silence between us was heavier than the storm outside. He sank onto the couch, elbows on his knees. "I messed up," he said finally. "The condo deal, it collapsed. Investors pulled out, and I guaranteed some of it personally." His voice cracked. "I could lose everything." "You already did," I said, not unkindly. He looked up sharply. "You think I don't know that?" His voice rose, then softened. "I used to think I was untouchable. And you?" He gestured vaguely. "You were the safe one, the boring one. Turns out you were the only one building something real." I leaned against the wall, watching him crumble in the space he'd once claimed I'd never own. "Mom and Dad told me to come talk to you," he admitted after a long pause. "They said maybe you'd help, that you've done well, that you'd—" I cut him off. "I'll bail you out?" He flinched. Irene, quiet until now, looked up from her sketch pad. "She doesn't owe you that," she said flatly. Bryce turned toward her, startled by the stranger's voice. "I'm not asking for charity." "Then what are you asking for?" I said. He hesitated, running a hand through his hair. "A second chance, I guess, or maybe forgiveness. I don't know anymore." The room went quiet again. Outside, rain hit the windows like applause for something unseen. I exhaled slowly. "Bryce, when I was 16, I worked 3 jobs to save for college. You were out buying designer watches with money Mom gave you. When I started my business, you laughed and said I'd end up broke. Every time I tried to talk to you, you made it a competition I never asked to join. And now that the game's over, you want to hit reset?" He lowered his gaze. "I deserve that." "Yeah," I said softly. "You do." He rubbed his face, exhausted. "I'm not proud of what I did. But Nova, I'm scared. I don't have anyone else to talk to." That line pierced deeper than I wanted it to. I saw a flash of the brother I'd known before the arrogance, before Mom's endless praise turned him into their golden project. "You don't need my money," I said. "You need to learn how to stand on your own, the way I had to when no one believed in me." He nodded, slowly, the fight leaving him. "Maybe that's fair." He stood, looking smaller somehow. "Thanks for letting me in, even just for a few minutes." I walked him to the door. The rain had eased into a mist, the street slick with light. As he stepped outside, he turned back. "You did it, you know," he said. "You proved them wrong. You proved me wrong." I didn't answer. I just closed the door gently, not in anger, but in peace. Irene looked at me from the couch, eyes searching. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, after a long pause. "For the first time, I think I really am." She nodded slowly. "That was brave." "No," I said. "That was closure." Later that night, I sat in my study, watching the reflection of the garden in the rain-streaked glass. My laptop screen glowed softly, unfinished code waiting for me to return. I thought about the boy who once called me boring, the parents who laughed while he did, and the woman who'd spent years trying to prove herself to them. And I realized the proof wasn't the house, it wasn't the success or the silence. It was the moment I could face them, see the hurt, and still choose peace over revenge. That was the real freedom. A week after Bryce's visit, autumn finally settled over Maple Grove. The trees outside my window blazed red and gold, their leaves skimming across the lawn like quiet confessions. I spent my mornings coding by the fireplace, my afternoons on client calls, and my evenings listening to the creak of the old house as it adjusted to the cold. For the first time in my life, stillness didn't feel like waiting. It felt like arrival. Mom and Dad didn't call after Bryce came by. Maybe he'd told them what I said. maybe they were too proud or too ashamed. Either way, the silence was its own reply, and I didn't mind it. Then, one morning, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address. My name written in Mom's neat cursive. I stood at the curb for a while, the paper trembling in my hand before I opened it. Inside were two things: a folded letter and a faded photo of me and Bryce as kids, sitting on the porch of our old house, grinning with popsicles melting down our arms. The letter was short. Nova, I don't know how to reach you anymore. I see now that I pushed you away, trying to shape you into something you never needed to be. Your father and I thought we were helping. We weren't. We were cruel in ways we didn't recognize, and by the time we did, you'd already built a life without us. You should be proud of that. We are, even if we don't know how to say it right. Take care of yourself, honey. I hope one day you can forgive us, but even if you don't, I understand. Mom. No apology for the years of comparison, no desperate plea for reconnection, just quiet acknowledgement. For my mother, that was a novel-length confession. I tucked the photo into the frame on my bookshelf, between a potted plant and a stack of client contracts. The letter went into a drawer. I didn't respond. Some things are better left as echoes, not reopened wounds. By late October, life had taken on a rhythm I didn't expect. Calm, deliberate, earned. CodePath Solutions was thriving. Irene and I had launched the budgeting app, and within weeks it hit 10,000 downloads. She brought over cupcakes shaped like little laptops to celebrate, laughing when the frosting collapsed. Think about it, she said, leaning back on my couch. This all started because they doubted you. I smiled, setting down my glass. Yeah, sometimes the push that breaks you is the same one that frees you. She nodded. You're going to turn that into a quote post later, aren't you? Already did, I said, and she burst out laughing. We toasted to irony, success, and survival, the trio that built this version of me. A month later, Daniel came by to finalize paperwork for my company's expansion. Hiring another developer, formal contracts, the next step in something that once existed only in my head. You've done what most people never manage, he said, reviewing my numbers. You didn't just make money, you made meaning. I glanced at the stained glass light spilling across the desk, the colors pooling over the invoices, the receipts, the symbols of self-sufficiency. I think I just stopped asking for permission. Daniel smiled faintly. That's when people start calling it success. After he left, I stood by the window, watching the early winter fog roll across the street. The house creaked softly, a language I was beginning to understand. There was a time I thought I'd need closure to move on. Some grand confrontation, a final scene where they apologized, and I forgave them. But life rarely gives you that. What it does give you is distance, and the chance to fill it with something better. That night, as the fire dimmed, I wandered through the rooms of my house one last time before bed. The air smelled of oak and warmth and paint, all the small things I'd chosen. In the corner of the living room stood the first chair I'd bought for the space, an antique wingback with a tear in the fabric, repaired clumsily but with care. It reminded me of myself, flawed, mended, standing tall anyway. I ran my hand along the wall, whispering quietly, we did it. And for once, I didn't mean me. I meant us, me and the house. The dream that no longer felt like armor against my family's doubt, but a home I'd built entirely on my own terms. Before I turned off the lights, I glanced one last time at the front door. The same door I'd once slammed in their faces now just looked like wood. Solid, ordinary, harmless. It wasn't a boundary anymore. It was protection. And somewhere in that quiet, I realized something simple and steady. The house didn't prove them wrong. It proved me right. Because I hadn't built it to impress them. I'd built it to become myself. If you've ever been dismissed, underestimated, or told your dreams were foolish, remember this. You don't need their approval. You just need your persistence. And one day, when you finally close the door on what hurt you, you'll hear something unexpected. Peace.